Right, so number one this week, looking back over the ramifications, if you like, a little bit since last Thursday, but voting issues and the future of democracy. I know later on in the programme we're going to have a bit more of a detailed look at the election results around the country from last week. But yeah, and one of the things that sort of come out this week is the government are pushing the idea of voter ID, and they seem to be implying that it's the voters that are liars and corrupt, perhaps to shift the attention away from themselves. Do you think?
No doubt. I mean, there obviously been week after week after week of rampant corruption being exposed recently. So yeah, anything to deflect from that. But yeah, I mean, for those viewers that aren't aware, there was one conviction for voter fraud, voter identification fraud in the 2019 election. One conviction. This is a non-issue and a non-problem. But of course, the Conservatives, the government, are taking a leaf out of the American Republicans' book in terms of voter suppression measures to try and disenfranchise and stop the poorest people and black and ethnic minority people, particularly young people, from voting. And one of the measures they're looking to introduce is this photographic voter ID, like passport or driving license, which obviously, you know, it's estimated between 2 and 3.5 million people in this country don't have. They tend to be people in those sort of categories, and they tend to be people that are less likely to vote for the Conservatives.
And it's interesting that they cite Northern Ireland as a place where it's been successful, and obviously with the history of Northern Ireland, perhaps, you know, they consider that is a bit more of a priority to have this voter identification system. But as it's been pointed out since they pointed out that, you know, it's worked well in Northern Ireland, is that the voter turnout in Northern Ireland since has dropped quite significantly in some places. So the effect it's having is to obviously undermine and reduce democracy even further.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it's, you know, in places, it's one of, as I say, a number of voter suppression tactics used by the American right wing, the Republicans, and yeah, proven to be successful in stopping the poorer people, younger people, and black and ethnic minority people from voting, people that are less likely to vote Republican in America. So same here. And of course, it's not the only voter suppression tactic and assault on our democracy that the government are currently making. I mean, on top of certain things they've already done, they're now redrawing the electoral boundaries, gerrymandering, and there's a suggestion that could favour them by something like 30 to 35 seats, make those seats which currently they, you know, are not guaranteed to go to Conservatives, more or less guaranteed. So there's gerrymandering. There's also the attack on the judiciary and the ability of the courts to undertake judicial reviews and to hold the government to account, basically. You know, the Boris Johnson and the government have been very unhappy about the courts actually, you know, holding them to account and pointing out where they're breaking the law, and they don't want that anymore. So they're taking a sledgehammer to the judiciary's ability to hold them to account. And of course, they've been filling up the Lords with Tory peers, you know, adding 30, 40 peers at a time, Conservative peers. And then finally, of course, we've got the Police and Crime Bill, the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill 2021, which has given rise to all the Kill the Bill demonstrations. And obviously, one of the many things that are concerning about that bill is the likely result of it would be an assault on our right to protest and demonstrate, including against government policies and actions. So altogether, when you put all those things together, it represents a fair old assault on our what's left, at least, of our democracy in this country.
And what tends to happen is that a lot of these ideas are floated by the establishment parties through their establishment friends in the billionaire corporate media to assess the public's response. And often there's never an intention that they will fulfill everything that they desire. But what they do is, of course, is by allowing the public consciousness to be sort of enveloped by this extremist idea, understanding of what might occur as a result of the bill. They then come back and say, no, 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 no. We have no intention of doing anything like that. So what they actually achieve is what they sought to achieve, but just by taking the extreme to really create fear within the consciousness. And that's sort of one tactic that's been used for a very long time. And of course, the other thing, going back straight back to the voter ID, is the fact that one of the demographic groups that are going to be most affected, of course, are older people, the elderly. And when you look at who the older people and the elderly tend to vote for, it's much more likely to be Conservative. So interestingly, as a result of their policy, if it comes to fruition, it could actually hit the Conservatives more than many of the other political parties. So
I don't think it will. Go on, Jason.
So I was going to say, so I suspect that if that is the case, that it was never their intention. Again, it goes back to my first point, that they want to create the extreme, bring everything out into the open, and then bring it back to the line that they'd already drawn in the sand in the four walls.
Yeah. I mean, everything I know about voter ID and suppression from other places like America and what's already been deemed likely here through some studies is that it might affect some elderly people who tend to vote Conservative more, but the biggest groups it would, as I said, that it would
Yes.
affect would be young people, poorer people, Black and ethnic minority people who tend not to vote Conservative. So I think overall there'll be it would be disenfranchising those people far more than any potential Conservative voters. Yeah. I'm fascinated by the first thing you said, though, Jason. I couldn't agree more. I think there's a thing that happens now in America and here. Of course, we tend to follow a lot of what happens in America, where the right-wing politicians, aided by the billionaire media, as you say, like to float extreme right ideas. And it serves a number of purposes. It shifts, as you say, it sort of shifts public consciousness further to the right. It shifts what's called the Overton window, which is the sort of range of policies that are considered reasonable at any given time in any society. And we've seen over many years now, at least more than the last 10 years, we've seen that Overton window shift to the right and the right again and the right again. We've said both of the main political parties have shifted to the right in the last 2-3 years, and public consciousness and discourse has shifted further to the right. So yes, the Conservatives throw out their ideas about we might be bringing back the death penalty and some really atrocious things about immigration. We might get asylum seekers and put them on Ascension Island or something, really appalling, atrocious things. And even if they've no intention of doing it, or even if there's a bit of public backlash and they don't go ahead and do it, it has shifted the discourse and public consciousness once again to the right. And so they do this thing where they go, we're going to cut your legs off. And everyone goes, no, you can't do that. And they go, okay, we're going to cut your feet off. And everyone goes, thank God for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's a great place to finish. Because it does reflect, unfortunately, and people call it cynicism, but it reflects the reality of the psychological processes that take place within society that manipulate our behavior and our thinking. And I'm guessing this is going to be a recurring theme within 10 by 6 as we move forward, because so much of what we do is reactionary. So much of what we do is responding to the cage that we're actually locked into. So that will affect, as I say, so many different things.